this is Tony at Cover Magazine. I'm speaking to Hilario Itriago, the president of Boxx Insurance USA and co-lead at BrokerTech Ventures LATAM, and a lot of other titles that we will explore here and there. He's also one of the founders of Boxx Insurance Incorporated, an innovative cyber insurance company. Also got, obviously, Andre Symes. Everybody knows Andre by now in my interviews, co-CEO of Genasys. Andre and Hilario, thank you very much for taking your time to talk to me.
Pleasure, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
Hilario, unfortunately, I didn't record when you were doing that great introduction of yourself. But obviously, if I can sort of give my sort of side story on that, you've been in insurance for a very long time, 6 different countries. You've done everything from the basics up to the CEO of a large multinational, and you've done a lot of innovative stuff. You've been involved in Insurtech for quite a while. You've been speaking around Insurtech, attending a lot of events, etc. You've launched some innovative products, been involved in the launching of innovative Insurtech products and companies, businesses, etc. So a wealth of experience from Latin America, especially. I was interested in that because of the relationship with emerging markets and with entry-level business. So yeah, a wealth of experience. Thank you very much for being here to share some of that with us.
Thank you for the invite, guys. You know, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah. Hilario, so to kick off with, I think maybe just from your side, a little bit of your input in terms of the fact that your history shows a lot of involvement with insurance networks and the variety of industry stakeholders that gets involved when we do insurance, especially nowadays, because it's not about one company trying to own everything anymore. It's about everybody working together, collaborating to be able to provide what is needed in the market. So you can maybe give us a bit of your thought on where we are in terms of providing what the clients need because of our networks that are available to us.
Sure. You know, it's interesting that we've talked about this concept of collaboration and co-opetition and all that, and we've heard it from business schools and from many people that we've read in the past, but it hasn't really been until the digital world came about, with either the iPhone or the BlackBerry, whomever you can credit for that, and equally the web and the internet, etc., that you've seen that really accelerate. That you've seen that people no longer live in a capsule, particularly the incumbents in our industry. And so, to me, the test of that has been to really see whether creating these networks or ecosystems of players really bring them all together. That's step number one. So when I started the Insurtech.com with my partners at the time, and still some of them partners, I thought, would the Insurtechs really come to a place where they want to be known, where they want to showcase who they are and what they do, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, we did in Latin America because that was our backyard. I didn't know any other markets that well, so I thought, at least I speak Spanish and I can invite these people in my native language. So let's try and do it there. And the reality is that they really came, Tony. They really came. Today we have more than 150 of those registered in the map. They do it by themselves. It's free. It's just allowing them to showcase themselves. And the same has happened with the brokers, right? Broker networks have existed for many, many years, and there are many, many business models. But it hasn't been until we've said, come join a broker network that allows you to see what's happening out there around the world, to see what's happening in the Insurtech arena and whether that helps you or not in your business. Oh, and by the way, if you have some multinational business, you can do it as well. But that wasn't the nature of doing it. And so we're now in 10 markets. So one of the things that we've proven there is that those verticals can really blossom by virtue of their cross interests. And now the next test is to see how many of those networks can actually work together. How many of the Insurtechs, many of whom are, by the way, brokers, how many of them want to interact and learn from the traditional players who have a wealth of knowledge to share, and how much of those guys want to learn about the technology and the platforms and the ecosystem who they also want to know about. So I think that's an interesting thing to test.
So Andre, as a platform provider and somebody who's obviously been involved quite a lot in ideas and innovations and people trying to do things, etc., do you think we've gotten to a place where the incumbents are trusting the Insurtechs and the Insurtechs are trusting the incumbents as real network players to work together? Or do we still have that bit of tension to collaborate?
So before I get to that, I think I would probably, Hilario, to your point about who do we attribute this collaboration, this digital collaboration to, I would put some money on that. I saw an interview with Mr. Jobs in the early 80s talking about sharing collaboration space. And that was the first time I've actually seen someone really document the concept about, collaborating in the digital environment. So I would give it to him because he's currently a very high up in my admirable list. Tony, on your point about do we see better integration between Insurtechs and corporates? The answer, in my opinion, is no. What we are seeing is an acceleration in the technical capability of Insurtechs and ecosystems being able to be consumed by incumbents. And as usual, technology seems to be progressing faster than regulation and human nature. So we are seeing the cost of integration substantially come down. We are seeing how if we create ecosystems of value with this new reduced cost connectors, like APIs, creating exponential value as per Metcalfe's law within these ecosystems, starting to threaten the incumbents. And I think that the incumbents are getting a little bit more worried about it. From a global GWP point of view, Insurtech is still a tiny drop in the ocean, but people are starting to sit up. And the people who are sitting up are the big tech firms. It is the FANGs of the world. They taking note of what customers really, really want. The one thing that Insurtechs are super good at is customer engagement. They want to talk to their customers as often as possible. They're all about data-driven, customer-facing experience. And people are seeing that that's where we're busy onboarding customers. As a slight example of that, I've been trying to open up a NatWest bank account here in the UK for a month now, a month. I opened up a Revolut account in 2 minutes because of the customer experience. So if you want to have customer acquisition, you're going to have to start focusing on that. And I think the biggest challenge that we currently have about corporates, interacting better with networks like the ecosystems in the Insurtech space is quite honestly, I think adoption and willingness to do that. So a lot of people have innovation hubs, and Hilario is quite tightly involved with some of these innovation hubs. But taking something out of an innovation hub or an accelerator and making real impact in the corporate, I think there's still too much of a gap there.
In your experience with that, Hilario?
It's similar. I agree with Andre. I think you're starting to see corporates trying to test the waters more and more. I think many of them have tested in the past through the wrong model, thinking that if getting involved with an Insurtech is about either acquire them or trying to emulate what they're doing, or that kind of stuff. The reality is that they serve completely different purposes at this stage. The incumbents have a ton of legacy to deal with on their business as usual basis. That to assume that they're going to be able to grab an Insurtech mentality and capability and all that and just flick a switch and get it to work, it's not real. Now, what I think will happen is if incumbents manage to say, where do these Insurtechs really add value to a value proposition I am either not attacking or a problem I'm not solving or a space I don't have to deal with all my legacy, I think they have a great opportunity for both to really take advantage of that. But I don't think many of them are looking at it that way. And so I think it's going to take us a while, which in many ways, it's an opportunity for the Insurtechs themselves to really grow the business and find that space where the customer and the technology companies are willing to play. And at some point, the incumbents will have to follow.
Yeah, I think that's essential, because the way that I see it locally, especially, is we've got sort of two approaches. The one is they're just trying to get some of the underwriting, the incumbents. So they try to be the underwriter for the Insurtech, but that's about as far as it then goes. Or the alternative, there has been a few that has been good at it. Andre knows My Way Insurance quite well, and an insurance service called Indy. Both of those linked to the Sanlam Group, short-term life and those sort of things, where they allowed the innovators to sit separate, either under their own name, which in My Way is running quite separate as a digital platform. My Way is still not quite an Insurtech in my mind. I think they sort of just digital insurance. Indy, which they started off very interestingly as Indy by Sanlam, and they changed it later on to Sanlam Indy with great success, and it actually worked incredibly well when they made the change. So that's the two ways that I see currently. How do you think we can get that to change, to get the incumbents to really see that it needs to be an embracement? It mustn't be trying to hold the old model tight and just try and leverage off what the Insurtechs are doing.
Yeah, if you want, Andre, I'll start with that one. I think when you look at what's happening in Latin America, there are examples like the one you just mentioned. So, for example, in Argentina, a very large insurance organization and incumbent, and a great company, by the way, San Cristobal, decided a few years back to create their own Insurtech. They created Unico, completely separate brand, completely different value proposition, direct to the consumer, different business lines than what the incumbent parent was actually doing. And they really gained a lot of traction really quickly until they decided to enter some of the more traditional lines. And then clearly with some issues with their traditional distribution channels, in this case, the brokers. But nonetheless, that's a great example of someone who said, you know what, why don't we just try, and why don't we invest, and why don't we do it how it should be done? And they have been very successful in that. On the other hand, there's people who have been trying to do it internally. We can do it ourselves. Let's just try and do it ourselves and build it. And that's where they fall victims of the legacy, model, whereby it takes them 3 times as much to actually do it. It's part of the same issues that the legacy company has. There's lack of creativity on the product side, on the product development and product design. And so you end up with something that kind of looks like an Insurtech, but it doesn't really behave like one. How do they solve that problem? I think there's a lot of value, and that's why also I'm part of BrokerTech Ventures. I think there is a lot of value to say, why don't we give these people a space to showcase and show us how is it that they're tackling problems to get further with the distribution, to get faster with the technology, to really come up with new things. And then whatever comes out of that makes sense, we will go with it as opposed to try to adopt it. Because otherwise, then corporate indigestion happens when they try to swallow these things, believing that they're going to keep it as it is. And in reality, you're making them part of the bureaucracy and the legacy that unfortunately doesn't work as agile as these guys do. So give them a space, allow them to blossom, allow them to grow, and take the elements that would help you without necessarily having to mix the two.
I think that's a great way of putting it. It's almost, I suppose, kind of like going that, you know, look, number one, I think that simple, good digital insurance is a hell of a good step in the right direction. If we could just get there, I think we're solving 90% of the world's problems already. Potentially, you know, almost more towards Hilario's kind of position is that I think Insurtech is actually more like the Formula One world of insurance, where you're going out there, you're pushing the boundaries, you are putting things in that possibly can't scale into production cars and actually make a difference to many millions of policyholders. And whilst there's lots of big noise regarding, you know, the Insurtech unicorns, etc., that isn't as a consequence of good and strong, profitable business. That's just crazy capital market valuations at the moment. It is drawing good attention to it, but it doesn't mean that those are going to be sustainable business forever unless they start adopting more traditional practices. One of the challenges that we've seen about how do you get some of this good tech from F1 back into the production cars is actually the technology capabilities of the incumbents. A lot of them have got innovation arms, but they've got really, really solid, good, proper, long-lasting, but unagile tech stacks. And, you know, quite simply, I mean, something as mundane to us is going, well, I want usage-based insurance. If I'm driving my car today, I want to turn it on now, and if I'm not driving tomorrow, I want to turn it off. It's incredible if you start unpacking how few technology platforms can actually have policy inception dates or periods of things like a day or a week or a month. The majority of the underwriting platforms can simply only handle monthly or annual type policies. So the concept of even creating something that can be usage-based or on demand simply never catches any sort of traction, because right there and then, you know, I can't adopt the curves from Formula One into production cars because we don't have the battery packs. So let's just scrap the idea before it even gets to the table.
Yeah, I mean, your vehicle example is actually a really good one, because, you know, if you look at how the motor manufacturers have become sort of cross suppliers to each other of vehicles. I know particularly the Renault's got a very good 3-cylinder engine that are used by so many motor manufacturers. The self-drive technology now, that's actually a really good example of technology being transferred from one motor manufacturer to the other and being used and supplied by different, and almost as though they've accepted now that they're not going to compete on being the expert on certain things, but that they can take it off from other experts that are actually focusing on that. And maybe with Insurtech, that's what should start happening, that part of the Formula One car is taken up by another motor manufacturer, but not the whole thing.
No doubt. And you see more teams in Formula One now than ever. I'm a big fan of Formula One. So now you see, not only do you see more teams than ever, you see more diverse investors and team owners and talent within the Formula One teams than we saw a decade or two ago. You know, and so I think, to your point earlier, Tony, about, you know, underwriting teams used to be run by actuaries and distribution used to be sold, you know, was by salespeople. I think an interesting angle to this is you will have very different type of talent pools driving different teams within these organizations, because it's that mix that's going to make and bring the value up exponentially. You look at organizations that have a completely different purpose to the traditional insurance organizations that we grew up with, that are really getting into segments that nobody ever thought of. We have a company from Chile called Betterfly. Betterfly used to be called Burn to Give. The idea behind Betterfly is to get life insurance to more people in more places, just by virtue of these people sharing their daily lifestyle habits. So in reality, there is an insurance product at the end of the of the line, but it's not the initial aspect that these people are engaging the customers in the first place. And so, they're going and providing this platform within employee benefits. They're going to corporations and saying, give a better lifestyle mechanism for your employees to live based on. And by the way, the more data we gather, the more we're going to be able to help them have a better lifestyle. Oh, and by the way, we can give them a life policy at the end of all that, because we have the data, we know the customer, and we can actually provide it to them in a very different format than the traditional life insurance policy sold, right? And so these guys have raised tremendous amount of money. They have, to Andres' point, a valuation that God knows how it's going to be sustained going forward. The reality is that they're going to Brazil, which is a great thing, because they're going to a massive market to reach a massive audience, and I think they're going to be successful there. But the point being that younger, more diverse background, talented people are joining forces with experience, equally talent, but more open-minded professionals that are saying, maybe there's a different way to reach more people with a different kind of product using the technology than we traditionally have done in the past.
Now looking at that, who do you think is properly located or sit in that hub at the right place to be able to get those connections done? How do we get that? Because you have all of this stuff out there, all the ideas. You've got a lot of workable solutions. Each one of those workable solutions have got probably multiple innovative little tweaks in them that they use. So if you look at an Insurtech that's got a variety of technology in an ecosystem that they use to be able to get right what they do. And now if you take each one of those and you plot them around each other, you've got each Insurtech with a whole bunch of innovative things happening inside. You've got a bunch of Insurtechs sitting around, and they all have different innovative things happening. And then you've got these incumbents sitting around. How do we get that to cross-pollinate? As you say now, with Andre's great example with F1, that we ensure those innovations in the Insurtechs, etc., don't fall off the table, but we connect them all in this ecosystem. How do we get that right?
I think, look at what we're doing here, right? We're having a conversation, across continents, and we're trying to connect the dots between what is it that we think is actually making this conversation possible and making insurance, be better, right? I am convinced that the more we get these Insurtechs to have a common space to collaborate and to interact and to have different experience and to have business opportunities as well, because there's always that aspect. The more these people are going to be willing to share, right? Part of the problem when we get into these one-on-one conversations is that the Insurtechs probably don't want to share too much with the incumbent because they're not sure whether the incumbent is actually going to do business with them and so forth and so forth. But if we actually say, let's give them a space where the Insurtech map in Latin America talks to the Insurtech Association in Africa, and Instech London, which I know Andre has been part of or whatever. If we actually make a space where these people can actually talk very comfortably, there's going to be a lot more sharing going on. That's number one. I think number two is there is a lot to be learned by how things have been successful in certain markets and why others haven't been, and what's the angle to make it happen. So, for example, we have a company in Latin America called WeCover that do mobile insurance on demand. Now, mobile insurance in Latin America is important. It's very important because mobile theft is a huge thing. Now, you go to Europe, and maybe that's not the problem. theft of the mobile phone itself is not a problem, but there are other things that are relevant, to be covering along those lines. So what is it that we can share between, the organizations that are doing in a different way, so we can actually grow this? Remember, for me, at the end of the day, is the more people have insurance, the more sustainable their life is going to be. If I'm a small business and all I have is a laptop and a phone, I better insure those two. I better have someone who gives me the ability to insure those things, because if I lose one of the two, I'm out, right? And that happens from then onwards. And that applies to cyber, mobile, electronics, whatever. And those are products that are not traditional. The incumbents are not the ones driving it. And the Insurtechs are the ones that are really taking the technology to be able to do it, as Andrew was saying, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, whatever. Yeah. I think there's a lot to be done there.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to facilitate a workshop once in Kenya. This was probably about 7 or 8 years ago. That was when they were looking at changing their financial services regulation, because the short term and the long term were all connected in one regulatory format, and they were wanting to split them into short term and long term. And I facilitated a workshop between the insurers and the regulators in Kenya, and it was a very collaborative experience, because they were working together very well, and the outcome was quite good in terms of their regulatory changes. But when we started out, I used a very, very basic slide to illustrate to them the roles of the two parties, the regulator on the one side and the industry on the other side, through the outcome that we want to achieve. And I put a snakes and ladders board on the screen, and I showed them what happens when you move up from block 1 to the top. You roll the dice, which is life, and you move forward based on what the dice rolls. The challenge is that the lucky guys miss the snakes, and the guys that are not so lucky land on a snake. And insurance, basically, if you can cover the board with insurance, you can remove the snakes. And for me, especially in emerging markets, the way to move forward is to retain what you've built in the past, which in emerging markets is always a problem, and it's still a massive problem. So, Andre, you've had the benefit also of working now, spending a lot of time with tech in the UK and a lot of time here. And how do you see, have you seen some collaboration, as Hilario now spoke about continental sort of knowledge transfer? Because, I mean, Africa is not seen by many of the Western countries as we go and look there how to do things.
So, look, I think one of the things that Hilario and I always talk passionately about, and with yourself too, Tony, is the ability of emerging markets to be resourceful and innovative in solutions. I mean, the last kind of comparison I want to do for today is that there's a chap by the name of Ibor Victor. He's a Nigerian photographer who makes takes the most incredible photos with a camera and 1 or 2 props. He makes shadows and castings, and the output of it is award-winning. Very basic solutions to a very normal problem, incredible results. And that African and emerging market way of thinking about, we don't have access to massive resources, therefore we make really innovative solutions. That is catching the attention of the big capital markets. So while we aren't seeing much collaboration yet from an infrastructure point of view, there are people doing it. We are trying to do it by connecting Africa and Europe and South America in a call, or Miami actually, to do that. But Tony, 100%, the world is sitting up and taking note of what technologies and solutions are coming out of that space. Because if you can take that tech, which is done really cost effectively, and apply it at scale, I mean, my goodness, that is an Insurtech story to tell. Do we need to make a bigger effort ourselves to promote more of these companies out in the European and in the US spaces? Absolutely. But make no mistake about it, the world is sitting up and taking note of South Africa.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's quite positive because, you know, in my discussions with Insurtechs and with technology people and with even the incumbents in Africa, the obstacles and the hurdles that they have to overcome to be able to do insurance is like a breeding ground for innovation. To actually utilize things like geographical location, which in a Western context, geographical location is easy. You have an address. In Africa, it doesn't work like that. You know, you've got vast patches of country where there are no addresses. You know.
Yeah, and we see people like What Three Words as an example sliding into that space quite nicely. You know, I know it's the other way around. They're coming from outside Africa back in again, but it's those kind of simple solutions. Like everybody that looks at What Three Words goes, I should have thought of that. What an easy or simple solution to a complex problem. And that is, most good innovations are like that. It's that I think, you know, my old man always says it's that duh moment, like duh, why didn't I think of that? That's usually the sign of good innovation.
Mm. So where do we take this from here? I mean, do we have a Insurtech event where we put the incumbents on the one side of the room and we put the Insurtechs on the other side of the room and we ask them what it is that is keeping them apart, you know?
Well, that's an interesting question, and let me tell you something. One thing that we did at Insurtech Connect Vegas this year through Broker Tech Ventures is there was a Broker Tech Ventures space on the floor of the conference that was basically inviting exactly that, inviting Insurtechs to talk to each other, Insurtechs to talk to the incumbents, because, you know, they bring both, at least in the US today, they bring both together. And so doing that was a very interesting exercise, very, very interesting exercise, because you could see genuine interest from both parties to talk to each other. And some of them ended up in some kind of conversation that, you know, has gone beyond the conference. And some others have just been knowledge transfer, pure knowledge transfer. You know, I haven't seen this in my market. I know someone in your market that you can talk to, or this or that. I think the more that happens on a regular basis, and it doesn't have to wait for a big Vegas conference to do it. You know, the more that happens in a space that might be virtual, that might be in one in one continent and in another, the more people are going to start saying, these people are talking to each other. Mm-hmm. And if we're not part of that conversation, we're missing out on something. So let's be part of that conversation. And the more that happens, the better the whole ecosystem is going to be, no doubt about it.
Yeah. We, as an insurance industry, I mean, we're definitely sitting on the cusp of finding the end of the rainbow. I firmly believe in that. It's just, you know, who is it that actually going to find that pot of gold? Was it going to be a shared pot of gold? Because the last thing that the insurance industry would want is, I suspect, a Google or an Amazon to completely overwhelm that space. You know, if you look at what Facebook or the Metaverse is doing in terms of, you know, bringing every little bit of that they can into one hub, then, you know, I wouldn't want to see insurance go the same route.
No doubt.
No doubt. And the thing is, Tony, they're coming. You know, so, you know, the incumbents and the Insurtechs need to start working together, because if they actually start solving the customer's problem, that is what you are going to do to dissuade the big money from coming in. Whilst we are underserving customers, and, you know, insurers talking to their customers once or twice a year, maybe, very, very, you know, unhappy customers, grudge purchase, All of these things just make it an easy, there's a low barrier to get in. Right now, the main thing holding back is regulation. But you have these tech companies that are incredible at customer experience, with a void, people begging for good customer experience in the insurance space. And the best way for us to keep the wolves out, and not that I think they're the wolves, but they're kind of just that saying, is to just do better at what we do. Good direct or good digital insurance, again, makes it a lot more difficult for them to disrupt it. They can maybe make a small change, but it won't be a step change.
But I'll add something to that as well, because I like where that train of thought from Andre is going, and given that he's an a Steve Jobs fan, me too. For many years, I used to own an Apple and pay for a PowerBook when people thought you were an idiot when you could buy a Windows machine for a lot less. But the whole point of this as well comes down to, you have to think of something that it's bigger than ourselves in order to really, aim higher. When Steve Jobs said that the Mac, when he came back to Apple, he said the Mac was going to become the digital hub of all your things. He was thinking of a digital hub that he, at that moment, painted in a hardware view of the world. The Mac was at the center, the iMac, as he brought it back in 1997, 98, and then everything connected to the iMac. But then that digital hub he took away, and he said, and we're going to do a digital hub for music. And iTunes came along, and we're going to do a digital hub for developers. And the App Store came along. And always thinking of serving a higher purpose than what you're trying to serve yourself, which economically will help you, no doubt. And we're here for that. But we have to think, let's get to more people. Let's insure more people. Let's have new products out there that nobody's thinking about. Let's give it to them the way they want. Let's actually do that, because otherwise we're going to keep on thinking of phenomenal products in a vacuum that we go out and sell and nobody buys. I was part of a team that thought of a product in Chile back in 2008 that we thought was going to rock the world in the Chilean market, and we sold about 7 policies. It was like, because we thought of it in a room, we didn't really think of the customer. We didn't bring the customer in. We never thought of what kind of technology would make a difference to it. We did none of that. And so it didn't happen. We have a chance to do it completely different this time around. And it's about collaboration and sharing knowledge, no doubt.
Well, Hilario, Andre, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge today. It was great chatting to you and just brainstorming a couple of these things. And I look forward to doing that again. And I also look forward, we're busy planning our Insurtech event for next year. Andre, you would be glad to know we've actually decided to do it twice next year. I found the sort of digital environment of attending events and the acceptance of that has actually really worked well in our favor in terms of getting more people interested in being part of it. And so we've decided to do it twice next year. So it would be great to carry on this conversation there as well, and to build on that in terms of how do we get the collaboration, because my wish is that I can get more of the other African countries to be more involved in that, rather than sort of try and work in isolation where they are. So yeah, I look forward to sharing some of that information with you guys and then collaborating towards an interesting event.
Look forward to it, Tony.
Absolutely.
That sounds phenomenal, Tony. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you, Hilario. I appreciate your time. And yeah, go well, guys. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you very much. Chat soon.
Pleasure being with you guys. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you very much.